welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Laura Berenstein. She is a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist and physician coach. She wrote the Kevin MD article, The New Rules of Time Management. Laura, welcome to the show.
Kevin, thank you for having me. So I'm a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist. And so that's a really specific area of medicine, but we've had a hugely growing population of patients over the last 25 years. So we've seen ourselves get steadily busier and busier. And I love what I do. I'm absolutely passionate about it. But there came a point where I realized that not only was it taking a toll on me, but that if I stayed in the OR all the time, I couldn't do anything else. And there were a lot of other things that really mattered to me.
So take us through a typical day of what you do and what separates a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist from the other specialties of medicine.
I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of my patients like to have one ventricle instead of two. And so since they have one ventricle, they've been through or in the process of going through some number of palliative surgeries in order to enable them to survive with that one ventricle. And that gets complicated. And over time, sometimes those surgeries fail and then we head toward transplant. So it's a really rich and complex area and growing all the time.
So you alluded to some of the challenges of the profession. Tell me about some of those.
I think some of the challenges are the very things that attract us. We love the fact that we get real continuity with our patients. We see so many of these patients and families from multiple caths, multiple surgeries. We develop relationships with them. But that's also one of the real challenges is that over time, many of our patients do well, but a lot of the patients we see come back most frequently, sadly, are not the ones that are doing as well. So I think in addition to the fact that, we work long hours, we work with a really critically ill patient population and we get emotionally involved at times and that takes a toll.
So tell me how you've managed that, not only the emotional toll of the profession, but really it sounds like these procedures and dealing with a critically ill population, you just spend countless hours in the operating room. So tell me how you've dealt with these challenges.
Well, I guess on the personal side, as a mom of 3 daughters who are now grown up, I feel like I managed that in the best way I could, which is to say at any given moment, I felt like I was juggling about 12 different balls and ready to drop maybe 2 of them. And I managed to get most of the things done that I needed to get done. But I always felt like I was behind on more than a few tasks. And I wasn't at a point where I really felt like I was enjoying my life so much as I was just ticking off the things I needed to get done.
All right, let's transition and talk about your Kevin MD article. It's titled The New Rules of Time Management. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
So I decided to write it. It was almost a spontaneous outpouring. I sat at my computer one night and I had recently read the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, which is wonderful. But as I sat there, I just was needing to put on paper everything that I had distilled over the last few years, because over the last few years, as I decided to pivot my career and spend less time in the operating room and spend more time in professional development and well-being and leadership, I just looked at the way we live our lives and I said, how can we expect to be healthy when we spend our lives doing and not being? And I felt compelled to write about some of the things that I finally felt after years that I was beginning to learn and that I wish I could have accepted earlier.
All right, go into more detail. I'm interested in hearing what are those specific things that you learned now that you wish you knew back then?
I wish I'd known that, first of all, why do we do anything that we do, right? What's our purpose? What's our reason for being? What are our values and why does it matter to us? Are we just following a script that we think we're supposed to follow? Because I think a lot of times in medicine that happens to us. We get very good at taking the tests and following the blueprint and looking for whatever the next defined step to success seems to be. And we don't necessarily stop and ask ourselves, is this right for me? And is this what I want? So I think along the way to that, I think I tried to do everything that I could do, feeling that to say no to anything was somehow heresy. So this piece that I wrote really sort of embraced the idea that it's okay for me to say, here are my three main tasks every day. And they might be personal or they might be professional, but these are the three things that are important to me today. This is what I'm going to get done. And as I do those things, I'm going to allow myself to actually be present while I do them. I'm not going to race through them saying, how fast can I get this done to get to the next thing? I'm going to actually do it right, which means, okay, these things I'm going to do, but other things, if I need them to get done today, this is how much time I have. They may be good enough. And for somebody in my profession, as with a lot of us, there's this big streak of perfectionism. It has to be perfect. And I needed to let go of that. I needed to realize that there are certain things that I just need to say, this is good enough. And I needed to be able to say increasingly, at this point in my career, in my life, what is important to me? What do I want my legacy, my impact to be? Am I contributing to things that feel important to me? Because if I'm not, then I need to develop the skill of gracefully saying no to projects, even if they sound good. Maybe they're not for me. And lastly, I need to take care of myself. And that partly means being aware of the things that sap my energy and being aware of the things that give me energy and balancing the two.
Was there a specific event or series of events that led you to this point where you're able to be present for specific things during the day, where you're able to gracefully say no to projects? What led you to that realization?
I think you're asking a really great question because the important part of the answer is that it was a process. Now, the decision on my part to pivot my career and the way I was living my life, that was very specific, and that happened 4 years ago, September. But the implementation and the doing of that is very much a process. And I think that's important because I think when you've lived the kind of life most of us live, where we are in high pressure environments and we're busy all the time, we multitask, you can't turn that off instantly. You have to be patient with yourself.
What was that process like? And how long did it take you?
Well, it's a process that I'm still living and probably will for the rest of my life. I think it started because multiple influences came to me at the same time. I was already involved in efforts at physician well-being, and I was the director of well-being at my institution. And I was a mind-body medicine facilitator. And so that had led me to study meditation and to lead groups. But then I also attended a conference and I heard Amy Edmondson speak, and she speaks about psychological safety. And I was also invited to be part of the Women's Empowerment Leadership Initiative through the Society for Pediatric Anesthesia. And we specifically are coaching women in pediatric anesthesia to help them gain leadership positions. All of those things were influences on me. All of those things together made me say, I feel like coaching is an important direction for me to take. I want to help colleagues coming behind me, and I want to do that in a way that allows them to choose professional development that's right for them and incorporate well-being into their lives.
Now, ever since you've made that pivot into more professional development, tell me about the influence you've had on other physicians who have looked at your career, looked at your pivot, and have they ever thought, I want to be more like that?
That's a really interesting question too, because I think it's so hard for us to see ourselves as others see us. And I think each stage of life holds surprises. So one surprise is that for the parents of small kids, yes, my girls are grown, and on average, I still hear from all of them every day. And two of the three this week tried to guilt me into why they hadn't heard from me more frequently and why was I ignoring them. So I guess, there are certain parts of life that we always are going to have a high allegiance toward. And I think part of what's important to me now is to recognize and accept that and to say that that's a priority for me. And so being able to do that probably looks aspirational to some of the people behind me because it probably seems like it is easier for me to make that pivot at this point. I will say that it was still very scary for me last year when I left a full-time clinical position and elected to become a coach and work part-time clinically, because in academic medicine, the only model I'd ever known was you're all in or you're not,
Yeah.
right? So carving this new route out has felt uncertain and scary to me, but it's also exciting and it's happening.
When you made that pivot and took more of a part-time clinical role, in general, what was the reaction of some of your colleagues?
You know, it was interesting. Some expressed a little bit of envy, and I had one person outright say to me, I don't see why you don't turn your back on this and walk away and never do it again. But the interesting thing is, just as much as I felt passionate about pediatric cardiac anesthesia for the first 25 years of my career, I wake up every day right now feeling just as passionate about the work I'm doing with the ASA leadership programs, the Women's Empowerment Leadership Initiative, my own coaching, because I see this is contributing to the future of my colleagues and the future of how we practice medicine. And that's crucial.
We're talking to Laura Berenstein. She is a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist and a physician coach. She wrote the Kevin MD article, The New Rules of Time Management. Laura, for those physicians who are listening to this podcast and maybe you've sparked a light bulb moment in them and they may want to do something similar, what kind of advice can you give them? What kind of things should they be considering if they want to make a similar pivot?
I think the first thing is allow yourself to ask the questions and live what's in your heart. Listen to what's important to you and realize that so much more is possible than we're led to believe. We have limitless potential, and there are so many more opportunities out there than we necessarily believe that there are. But we have to be brave enough to first understand what it is we really want, and then ask the questions to start discovering, just one step at a time, what would it take to move in that direction?
And in coming to those realizations and answering those questions that you asked, did you have any mentors, coaches? Did you come to these realizations on your own?
Absolutely, I did not. No, I've had so many wonderful coaches and mentors, and each one of them in their own way has been instrumental. And so that's another thing I'd say is look for guidance everywhere. Look for a coach, look for multiple mentors. Ask people if they'll mentor you. Anywhere that you can find help, seek it out and ask the questions.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
My favorite and biggest message, because medicine is something that from the moment we first say, I want to go to medical school, I need to take the MCAT, we spend our lives projecting about the next step and what that will look like. And when we get to that place, then we'll be set. And then the next thing comes along, right? Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing I'd say is don't jump ahead. Live today. This is your moment. Don't project yourself into the future and spend your life wishing. Live today and love it.
Laura, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.